Welcome back to Birching the West, where we talk about all things related to being a bircher, an educational activist in the Western United States. And we're educating people for freedom. Today, we're talking with two very special guests about what to many people is not a real familiar subject, but is a very highly discussed, passionate debate type of discussion. It's called the Constitutional Convention. Some people call it a Article 5 convention or a convention of states. But we'll be going to be talking about efforts in the United States and efforts pushing against that idea as well for calling a convention for proposing amendments to the U.S. Constitution. What's it about? All the different aspects of it, and it's something that our members have been involved in for a while, pushing back on that. So we have two special guests, Leah Southwell, who is a coordinator with the John Birch Society. She covers all of Colorado and then parts of 3 other states, Montana, Wyoming, and South Dakota. You can imagine Leah is on the road from time to time. Then we have Clare Parker from up in Montana, and Claire can, I think, tell us a little bit about her experience in opposing this. Just went up to Helena, Montana, to testify on one of these resolutions. So, where should we start? Should we start with Leah here? We want to.
Yes, please do.
Okay,
yes.
Leah. Maybe for those watching or listening that are kind of new to this subject, can you give us a kind of an overview? What are we talking about here? What is this?
Well, it's been ongoing for a long time. There are efforts from some to open the door to the Constitution and make amendments. And I believe that there are a lot of very good people who have been misled to believe that this is a good idea, that we have serious problems in this country, and that the solutions to these problems lie in the Constitution. And if we were just to amend and fix the Constitution, then these problems would go away. And I think birchers are wise enough to understand that there's serious, dangerous consequences in opening that door. And if you really think about it, what the Birch Society is all about too, is that we need to go to the root cause of the problems and look at the solutions. Do these really address the root cause, or do they not? And that's where I think the Birch Society has served a very valuable and protective measure to the Constitution in opposing this, and in feeling the need and obligation to educate others as to why this is not a good idea. And so most of these people that are for it have heard the one side, but they haven't heard the other side, and or they're sensing a state of desperation that if we don't do something, if we don't do something, then we're going to be in grave danger. And yes, we need to do something, but anything is not something, and anything will not be effective. And so that's the basic foundation of what we're discussing here.
So you're saying that there's a lot of people that are concerned about what's going on in the United States, and people that, I guess, proponents of the idea of having this convention, they come in and say, this is your solution, or this is what we should do. Is that
right?
right?
Right. Yes, exactly. And not wanting to get too deep into it, but I have now seen and studied this in other countries, what happens when you open that door, that very often the entire Constitution gets thrown out, and the people who want that most is the left. So the left understands that constitutions restrain them from doing what they want to do, and they have to get rid of these restraints in order to impose greater socialism and or even communism. And this has happened over and over throughout history that most Americans are ignorant to, because we are one of the very rare and lucky countries who have had a constitution worthy of protecting and defending. For 233 years, we've managed to do that, whereas many other countries, the average for South America is 17 years. Every 17 years, they throw out their constitution, start all over again. And so they too are brainwashed to believe that their problems lie in the Constitution, and that by bringing about a new one and or changing or fixing it, it's the magic wand that fixes everything. And it's not. It's not the reason for their problems. They can't even identify. And as I experienced in the country of Chile, if you ask them what specifically is wrong with the Constitution, they cannot tell you what's wrong with it. Why? Because they haven't read it. They don't even know what it says, but they have been told that the Constitution is the fault of their problems, and we just need to fix the Constitution. So it's a lack of knowledge, it's a lack of experience, why people would fall for this false narrative.
Yeah, and how would you say, I guess in America, is people's understanding of the Constitution? Would you say it's very good or what?
Very poor.
Very poor.
Not as poor as maybe in other countries. I still believe that there is a foundation, and sadly it's with the older generation, because they robbed this of us from the schools almost 50 years ago. So we're going on 3 generations now who've had zero education on the Constitution. So it tends to be the older generation that still understands these values and the understanding of the Constitution, and or those that have taken the time to study. There are other organizations out there that have done a pretty good job of providing education, but people have to want it. They have to go seek it. You wouldn't naturally know any of these ideas of the Constitution unless you've had some form of study and education on it.
Yeah, yeah, I suppose, right? If you don't study it, you're not going to learn it. You got to
It
study it
doesn't,
somewhere.
yeah, it
Doesn't
doesn't
have by
come by
magic.
nature. No, it
Yeah, that's
doesn't.
right.
That's why it makes
So,
it an easy target to blame, right?
yeah, I suppose if you don't know about it, you might think that's the cause of your problems.
Yeah.
So, what's going on right now in your area? Um, is there something that's happened? Can you tell about that a little bit?
Yeah, a lot has happened. It's been a heck of a 7 weeks, and it's not over yet. But about 7 weeks ago, um, Montana made the first call. So there's an organization called the Convention of States, and the Convention of States is the primary proponent who's been pushing this constitutional convention. There have been other organizations in the past, but this is the big one right now who's pushing it, with other organizations that are backing their efforts and or are pushing it from different directions. But Montana made their first call. I don't even remember. Do you remember the date, Eldon?
Oh, you mean when
For
it was
Montana's,
introduced?
yeah, Montana's resolution.
Somewhere end
About,
of January? Is that
yeah,
right?
could be. That sounds about right. That's around the 7 weeks. So
Yeah.
Montana was the first state for introducing a resolution. This is probably introduced most every year in a lot of states. It comes up every single year. Montana only meets once every 2 years. So at least we have a year off where we don't have to be so terrified of what the legislature is doing to us or for us or against us. So Montana was the first one. We went to it all happens very, very rapidly. This is why we have to be prepared outside of legislative sessions. This was my great lesson here, is you do not win it once it's been called in the legislature. You have to be well prepared and have trained your members, your community and your legislators way before this legislation is introduced. So I personally feel like I got caught, if you could call it, with my pants down, unprepared for this one in Montana. And thankfully Eldon had this territory and had done a lot of work. Robert Brown had this
Yeah.
territory before and had done a lot of work. And so Montana was probably best prepared of all the states, but it still catches you off guard. You're never prepared enough for this. So quickly after that, I think a week later, South Dakota had their call for it. And so we've been battling it in 2 states at the same time. And they basically took the same strategy. So conventions of the states prepares their side way in advance. This is all they do. All of their funding goes for this one effort, where we have many, many efforts that we're doing as members and as coordinators. And so we're always playing defense because they play very aggressively and have a plan. So they had already hired paid legislators who, before the session even started, had been working on the legislators
Yeah,
in
paid
training
lobbyists.
Yeah, paid
Yeah.
lobbyists. And then they also have volunteer members who have been holding town halls throughout the states and educating in citizens as to why the con is a good idea. And so this was what we were up against, is they had already done a lot of work beforehand and we had to play catch up. So more or less as an emergency, most of us as the coordinators stepped in and testified this very first time because it all happened so quickly. We didn't even have time to warn the members that this was going on. It happened so fast. So we did a good job. We killed it in committee in Montana. Same thing happened in South Dakota. We didn't even have time to warn the members. And so again, the coordinators, past, present, current, I can't say future, but we all got involved in stopping it again in South Dakota. So we killed it in committee. Now, normally in a legislative session, that's it. You killed it in committee, it doesn't continue any further. And both in South Dakota and Montana, they have a way to either blast it out or smoke it out of committee, which is what happened. And so the floor can take a vote and say, we want to hear it and have a vote on it, which they did. Successfully killed it in Montana, successfully killed it again in South Dakota. And that wasn't enough for them. Convention of States is going to push them, push them, push them. In desperation, we have to get this passed. And so they just switched houses on both states and brought it into the committees on the other house, the Senate or the House. So they just switched sides. It again went to committee. And again, South Dakota had some really good help, not only from Birch Society, they had other organizations helping them too. And this time, Eldon and I were able to sit back and not get involved intensely ourselves. We didn't testify ourselves, and there were enough other people to testify. Montana legislator actually got smart. I have high respect actually for what they did. In the third attempt, they said no more outside testimony, because it was always Mark Meckler and the conventions of the state against the Birch Society. And each one brings out their best guns, the strongest people, and we duke it out. And it's the same people in every single state. We keep doing this. And Montana thankfully said, no more. We don't want any outside testimony. We want to hear it from our own people. So this time we had a little bit of advance warning, and we were able to contact all of our members and even non-members and say, we need your help. You need to go testify yourself. So we did help prepare some people. Some of you were already prepared, have been doing this for years. You knew your material. Claire, I just want to say my hat off to you. You did a beautiful, spectacular job. You nearly brought me to tears. It was so touching and so emotional. Nobody could have done a better job. I really have to say you did a better job than any of us coordinators did. I do have to say on one side, I don't know how effective testimony actually is. I don't know whether they've already made up their minds or not, but we still have to do it. And so groups like our Broadus people pulled it off and sent a ton of emails. They sent in written testimony, and we had been told that there would be no Zoom testimony, and it turned out that there was Zoom testimony. So thankfully, some of our members went ahead and requested Zoom testimony, or I should say remote testimony, and they were able to testify. So this morning we had a conference call, and I told everybody I felt like a proud mama, that I didn't know how good our membership was and how capable they were of doing this themselves. But we need to be better educated or better prepared next year, so that each of you do this job without us. You shouldn't even need us, other than we can warn you and give you the tip off that the bill has been introduced. But now you all know, and we're just here to coordinate. What we did was we helped figure out who would actually go physically to testify, who would write written testimony, who would send out emails, and who would just step up and say, I oppose. So really, it was an amazing job. So we killed it in both Montana and South Dakota equally on Wednesday. We didn't hear about Montana until Wednesday night. It was kind of unofficial, but the chairperson tipped us off that it had failed. And so Wednesday night we were celebrating, and Wednesday morning we got an email from headquarters. They were watching all the bills that Wyoming passed their bill. So we got one evening of celebration, and the very next day we were back at war again with the Wyoming con. So this is how intense it is and how prepared you have to be, because it happens fast. And so the solution now for this next session is that I would like to see us as members have town halls in every part of the state that we possibly can, inviting citizens to come. And then I would like the citizens to say, representatives, you have to be here at this presentation, so that well in advance, all of the legislators have heard all of the dangers of a con, so that when legislation, the bill is introduced, many of them already know I will vote no. And then it isn't such
Yeah.
a panic and it isn't such a stress, because this is, in my opinion, the most important topic that we can take. If they ever get their hands on this Constitution, game over, we are done with. And this is the most important thing that we can possibly be doing. So we need better preparations so we're not caught off guard in such a panic next year or next years.
Yeah, definitely. Now, we probably should bring on Claire, since you talked about how testimony went in Helena, and give you a chance to make some remarks. Claire, thank you for testifying, and maybe you want to tell how do you feel it went, or what was your experience there?
It was a very positive experience for me. I felt very comfortable at Helena in the Capitol, and the people, the legislators and people who worked there, I thought they were very friendly and considerate and helpful. So I, I was kind of surprised. I didn't know what I was going to encounter, but I felt really good. I wasn't as nervous as I thought I would be when I went in to testify, but I didn't really know what was going on because we were not allowed in. And the big screen outside, there was so much noise, I couldn't really make out what was being said. So I was kind of just in my own little bubble, more or less. Although it was nice, very, very, it felt really good. I was so happy to meet other people of like mind, who are also part of the people who are opposed. And I went with my son, Ed, he brought me there. And it was really a positive experience for him too. He was so excited afterward. He said he'd take me anytime I wanted to go. So that's not going to be a problem anymore, how to get to Helena. So I'm very grateful for that. And maybe even Edward might at some point testify, I hope. But he did say he was opposed, and he felt very good about that.
Oh, good.
That's about all I really have to say. I think Leah and you probably found out a lot more about what was going on. You knew a lot more than I did, because I was just more or less to myself.
Well, we got to watch from afar, but
Eldon,
Yeah.
I want to add to that a really good suggestion for all of you. If you weren't there, you can go back. I'm trying to remember in Montana whether you can see it. I know you can
yes,
listen to the testimony. In one
you
state,
can.
you can just listen, and the other one, you can watch it in video. But it's nice to know who the players are. Sometimes the video is bad and you can't see who all the committee members are and when they're speaking. But now you understand why they ask you to state your name every time, because these are recorded. But it's good to go back and listen to testimony. I was able to do that too, to understand who the players were, what their arguments are, who's with us, who's against us, what kinds of questions that they ask, and then be much better prepared for future testimony in the next sessions.
They had a screen which and where you could see, and you're supposed to be able to hear everything that was going on, but there was so much noise with many people around, and actually the noise of the what was going on in the room just added to the noise I wasn't really able to distinguish that well what was being said. It was very hard to follow. So I don't know if that's what you're talking about, or if you're talking about something else, somewhere else we can go to see it.
No, that's what I was
Where's-
talking about, is go back and watch the testimony. You can re-watch it again. But I'll also tell
Watch
you
it
the
online.
difficulty with Montana that happened, and we had no idea, we couldn't have prepared you for this, is you have no idea where your bill is on the agenda. And we were shocked and appalled that it took 4 hours and 15 minutes before our bill even came up. So all of you spent the night, invested in a hotel room to be there at 7 o'clock in the morning, and then you sat for 4 hours and 15 minutes before the bill even came up. We too, we were watching it online, and we were watching South Dakota and Montana at the same time, trying to hear what bills they were covering in case both of them came up at the same time. And it worked out beautifully because Montana took 4 hours. South Dakota came up in between and finished
good.
2 minutes before Montana started theirs. So we were able to watch the full thing. But for the 3 hours before that, we were switching back and forth to screens to see what bill each state was on. But it's really a good experience to watch testimony on all kinds of bills, even if it isn't the bill that you care about. It's interesting to see who goes there to testify, what the bills are all about, what the process is, whether they take the vote right then and there or they take the vote later. It is important for all of us as citizens, and I have to admit to being one of them. I had testified a couple of times in Idaho, but I was not really informed as to how these processes work, that it goes to a committee. Bill is introduced, it's decided which committee it goes to. You can listen into the committee, and then from there, if it passes, then it goes to the floor. You can actually watch the debate happen on the floor, but we're not involved at that point. And so it's very important that we as citizens understand this legislative process. It's important to go to the website and understand how you look up bills, how you can be informed and warned about bills, and what the process is, how you can look up who are the members on the committee that will be making these decisions. And then Eldon and I, Eldon's much better at that I, go back to past years and see which people on the committee voted which way in prior years to know whether they're with us or against us. It's also very important for all of us as citizens to know our legislators, because our legislators will help us. And each and all during those testimonies and even on the floor, we were in constant contact via messaging with the legislators on the floor, either complimenting them for what they said or giving them ideas on how to debate what somebody else said. So if you really have a good relationship with your legislators, you are in touch with them live while these things are happening, and they will send you a message and say, just got notice, it got killed, isn't official until tomorrow, but they let us know these kinds of things. So that was quite exciting. And if you have a relationship with your legislator, a good one, and he's with us on these issues, he or she will keep you informed live, up to date in that way too. And they're thrilled to know that they have citizens or constituents that are with them on this and participating and living this with them.
Yeah, very much so. It's really an exciting thing, although it can be kind of dramatic, stressful at the same time. But like Leah says, great to know. You need to go to the Capitol at some point, get to know what the process is. And if you do that, it's very much to your advantage, because you can know, is it dead? Is there a procedural rule that they can use to resurrect it? What are the steps that it needs to go through? Who are the key players? Does the majority leader have a bunch of power, or can it be overridden? Do the committee chairs have a bunch of power, or does everything have to get a hearing? All kinds of things that can be to your advantage to know going in. And each state is a little bit different, so you need to know your state legislature and who's who and all of that. I guess I should probably give just a little bit of time before we turn it over to questions. We touched on Wyoming. You want to give kind of an overview? What's going on there? What's the status at this point?
Wyoming's really early, so Wednesday late afternoon the bill was introduced, and again I didn't know the process for Wyoming, so I called quite a few of our friendly legislators again that are with us on this and said, okay, the bill's up, it's been introduced or not introduced, it has been filed, and the The system in Wyoming, again, is a little bit different in that it goes to the Senate president and the majority whip leader, I believe, and they decide whether it gets introduced to a committee. And so there was even a small chance, which I missed out on this weekend, to get to that Senate president and say, hey, listen to me, there's a reason why you shouldn't even introduce this to committee. Let it lie. It's too big of a conflict. It's an emotional debate. It'll tear your Republicans in two different directions. This is not a good idea. I missed out on that opportunity. So timing again is vital. And this was again something that happened over the weekend. So Eldon informed me that today it had been introduced to a committee. So now we know that it's the committee. So what we commonly do is attack immediately. I don't mean attack, that's the wrong word. Get on the ball and email and call the committee members to see if you can kill it in committee. So you can usually figure out, when you have it all written down, find out which legislators are with us, which ones are on the fence, which ones are absolutely against us, and there's no point in even trying to educate them. And we do our little tally and we know whether we're safe or not. At this point, I believe we're not safe in this committee. It's likely going to pass out of committee. And so it doesn't do any good to focus just on the committee, because once it passes out of committee, it could be on the floor the very next day. So we don't have time again to go educate people when we have one day or even less than one day. So the strategy right now will be to go after the entire Senate for sure. And then we may as well go after the entire House too, and never hedge your bets. Don't assume that you've won something. Don't assume that the numbers are looking good, because people, the legislators, flip-flop like a fish. They're with us, they're against us, they're with us, they're against us, and we don't know at the moment of the vote which way they're going to go. So assume that you're going to lose it and it's going to go on to the next phase. So right now in Wyoming, we're assuming that we need to educate all senators, all House representatives in order to win this.
Yeah, you never know if it could get stopped in committee, but yeah, looking at the past votes of those 5 that are on the mining minerals committee, excuse me, looks like probably go to the floor, to the committee of the whole. But yeah, so we've got some folks here from Utah and also Nevada as well, I believe. I think they're probably wanting to know, well, Nevada's actually in a good spot. They rescinded all their applications for a constitutional convention. So congratulations, Nevada, of course. Utah is a little different story. They need to rescind 2 past applications, but so something to work on. But why don't we, are we ready for questions, or something else that we should touch on before we do that?
Ready for questions.
Okay. Now, those of you that have been here before, how this, we'd like you to do it, ask you one at a time, unmute yourself, ask your question, and then when you're done, mute yourself so we don't have a bunch of background noise and all that. But I'll turn it over for questions here. Who's first?
Not all at one time now.
Who's itching to ask a question of Claire or Leah or?
Well, can Claire ask a question?
Sure.
I'm really new to all of this, so everything that Leah was talking about sounded really good to me, but I just don't really know what the process is to go look all that stuff up and find it, or where to find it. So
I think, Eldon, maybe we can do in a future session where we walk you through. We can show you the screen. We can go to the website and say, this is how you find the bill. This is how you find past testimony. I think that's a great topic for a future session.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, I'd be happy to do that. That's we did that a couple weeks ago with Utah. Somebody, one of our members, just shared her screen, walked us through. We made a video, and then so of course, good thing to do for other states too.
Yeah, we actually have a past legislator on IC too. Chip, if you want to speak up, if there's anything that we left out, any advice for us for talking to legislators? If Chip's still listening.
I think it's *6 done. Well, I
He
think
looks like he's on a call. You can unmute yourself. Click on
I
the mute
just-
or unmute. But there he is.
Oh, there
My unmute was not working real well. I appreciated all of the info you spoke on. Legislators are an interesting group, and having been one, that doesn't make me an expert by any means, but they can shift gears faster than anyone.
Any advice for dealing with that?
As I think I've stated in the past, they generally, in my opinion, have their mind made up. And in particular, our discussion of certain legislators on the Senate committee that we were concerned about in South Dakota, oddly enough, the 5-4 vote in the Senate committee that sent it to the 41st day, which is killing it. There are a couple of interesting people in there. The one you were really concerned about did not change his mind, and I didn't think he would. But there's a Democrat as one of the 5 who sent it, who killed it, which I find interesting.
And there were,
Especially,
go ahead, Chip.
well, especially since they are supposed to be all, well, I'll scratch that. Never mind. There was 1 Democrat and 4 Republicans who voted that down in the South Dakota Senate.
And 2 of those we had not expected. They had voted against a rescission bill, that same Senate, but then they voted for killing the con. So they were opposite votes than we had expected. They voted completely different than we had expected. So that's what you have to count on too, that even though you think you have an idea of how they'll vote the opposite way.
And we had kind of discussed that in that the 2, a rescission bill and the actual resolution are 2 different animals.
Yeah.
And
Right.
they do change their
Right.
votes quite regularly on those 2.
And also somebody told me who was there that the committee members also are influenced, this is important for you to know, by their constituents sitting in the audience. So if they see quite a few of their own constituents that want them to vote a certain way, they may do it just because those constituents showed up for the testimony and are staring at them, and they know that there could be negative consequences to them. And this is another reason why being there for the testimony and staring your own legislator in the eye does have an impact on them.
And that's especially true when you have the gang of Mark
Meckler.
Meckler and the entire entourage in there.
Yes. So one thing too that you need to know is Meckler from Convention of the States actually hires buses to bus in constituents from the areas where they got to keep their legislator voting the way they want them to vote. And this is something that we're just not used to playing the game this way. We are intellectual people who feel like we should be able to win things by reason and rational argument. And that's not the way legislators work. We have to recognize that that's not the way they work. And we have to some extent play this game. We were talking about this morning on our conference call with the coordinators. There are still many legislators that are on the fence, and the way they make their decision is based on how many emails they get in opposition or in favor of a bill. They look at how many emails they get. Now, again, we're playing with an enemy that plays dirty. So Convention of the States will get people to send emails from all over the country to target legislators in a specific state. The way we feel is it should be the constituents of those legislators who send the emails. But when the legislator that's on the fence sees, hey, we got 500 emails against this or for a con, but we only got 50 against it because we're playing a different game, they will choose to go with the con because they got 500 emails and we only sent in 50 emails, but we're not playing it the same way they are. So we have to know that the odds are stacked against us. And this is why it's so important that our members actually do their job and even get their neighbors and their friends. It should weigh more to a legislator that it's a constituent of theirs. It should weigh more that it's someone from their state. But when it's an email, when it's a phone call, they have no idea where these people are from and they're just tallying them up.
Yeah, that's very true. So I don't mean to take anybody else's time for questions, but just what would you recommend for, I guess, preparing for next year or this year to be successful? What would be probably the place to focus our efforts?
Number one, have your
members.
personal legislators prepared for this. We have a legislator packet. Everybody should order legislative packets for their own legislators. They need to meet with them. If you need to go through this material and watch videos with them, you can't just put it in their hands and assume that they're going to read it and or watch it. They're not. Invite them to a town hall, invite them to your chapter meeting, and make sure that they know exactly where they stand on this, or give them the education and then ask them, where do you stand on this? Then you're still going to even have to bolster them on the way there. We had a legislator in Billings who had been through our Constitution is the Solution series. And yet when I met with him just 10 days before the legislative session, I said, where do you stand on this? And he said, well, I used to be with you guys, but now I'm not so sure. So I had to bolster him up again just before he went into legislative session to make sure that he understood why we absolutely cannot support this and that we're going to be fighting him if he doesn't do it. And so he went in stronger because I met with him just before he went to Helena again. So even though they go through this, we have to stay on top of them. And there's a lot of pressure being put on these legislators from all sides, and so they'll waver. So we have to keep them strong. Oh, there you go.
Yeah, just thought that's the state legislator packet. Now, by the way, how did that vote go on the Senate floor in Montana?
The count?
Yeah.
I actually don't know. Do you have it, Eldon?
I do. It was one of those, softball questions, but 26 to 24. So 2 votes changed. If you would have talked with that one legislator, it would have been tied, I suppose, possibly.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
so when it comes that close, you
very, very
don't
close.
know. You don't know if your call, if your email, if your meeting with that person made the difference, because these are often won or lost by 1 vote.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's what happened there. And I think in the committee, some of these committees, it was by 1 vote. Could have gone either way. So you never assume, right?
Yep.
Any other questions someone might have? Anybody got a burning question?
I assume then that in Montana, after the committee voted it down, that it did not get blasted or smoked out then.
Right.
And Eldon, they have actually until tomorrow where that might still
Oh,
possibly happen, right?
No.
In Montana, I believe so. That's transmittal
We'll
day, they
know
call
for
it.
sure by tomorrow if.
Yeah, there's a certain date when they can't do it anymore. And I think from Montana that it is tomorrow when the final day is that they would have to do it. So this was frustrating for me too, to see that they can literally bring this back 4 times. So never assume that you're done either. Never assume it's done until the session is over.
Yeah, it could, I mean, there's always a possibility you could get a 2/3 vote to suspend the rules and bring it back after the transmittal or the crossover day. Of course, that's unlikely if you got a close vote, but I have seen that happen though in South Dakota in the past, where a legislator got 2/3 of the Senate members to vote to suspend the rules, and he brought a resolution to the Senate floor without going through committee.
With it,
So-
which is the message for you to recognize how desperate the other
Yes.
side is.
Yes, very
We
much
are
so.
playing with a desperate opponent
Yeah.
who is normally, this is
Very
the saddest
determined.
part, who is normally with us on every other issue. This is what makes it really tough and why they should stop bringing this forward, because it is extraordinarily divisive.
Yeah, very good point. Yeah,
And also the other issue is we have to make sure that people are trained and taught. This isn't just about saying no to the con. We actually do have better solutions. So this is their frustration. The legislators say, well, if not this, then what? So that's the next step that maybe we need to do more training on is what is the option for this? And then you'll be better prepared to talk to your legislators and say, look, this isn't the only option. The other options that we have are far less divisive. So let's work on things that we can agree on instead of spending all of our time fighting each other when the enemy's out there just waiting for us to open a door for them through our divisiveness.
Maybe we should talk about that a little bit. What are some options that would be better than just having a constitutional convention, an Article 5 convention?
Why don't you tell us, Eldon?
Well, let me tell you. All right. So one of the things that the founders talked us about is what they called nullification. Of course, that's often misunderstood term, but basically it's enforcing the Constitution. If you're going to enforce the Constitution, wouldn't that be something that would be better than changing the Constitution if people are ignoring the Constitution? So a lot of these people, of course, with convention of states and other proponents of a constitutional convention, they try to either misrepresent what nullification is, or they try to say, no, it's not effective. It's never worked, something like that. But the founders actually spoke pretty extensively about that. And let's see if I can actually share my screen here for you, show you. We have a campaign with the John Birch Society. Rein in big government with Article 6, not 5. You can look up brief videos. What is Article 6? What is the oath of office? What is the supremacy clause? That's all in Article 6. What does that mean? What about the 10th Amendment? How does that relate to it? What tools can we use to educate ourselves and others? So all of those things kind of help us understand this a little bit more. But basically, the founders said that, you know what, if somebody is ignoring the Constitution, there's various devices that we can use. Some of it would be employed by the state legislature. It could be employed by the governor, the attorney general, the voters themselves, various angles that can be used to enforce the Constitution. But of course, if we're going to enforce the Constitution, what does that mean? Well, we need to understand it, don't we? So that's on us to educate ourselves and educate others. The idea of a constitutional convention really doesn't strike at the root of the problem. The root of the problem is people just do not understand the limits on power under the Constitution. So I would highly recommend a video called Rein in Big Government. Well, it's on this banner right here, Rein in Big Government with Article 6, not 5. And so that is a real nice in-depth introduction to this subject, but there are shorter videos as well. Probably the one that's nice and brief is a crash course on nullification versus a constitutional convention. So watch that. So any comments you might have, Leah, on that?
Oh, I think that's good. I liken it just to if the federal government is mandating something to the states that is unconstitutional, they don't have the authority to tell the states to do that. Why wouldn't the states just be able to say, I don't believe you have any authority to tell us that, so therefore we're just not going to do it. That's basically what nullification is. And the other thing is, I was shocked in talking to legislators who I think and assumed were kind of the best of the area, and that's why they were elected, that they didn't even understand states' rights. They didn't understand what the balance was to be. They didn't understand that it was the states that formed the federal government, that the federal government was given very limited and well enumerated tasks of what they were allowed to do. If it's outside of their purview, it is the states, totally the states' rights and the rights of the citizens to say, no, federal government, you have no authority over us in this aspect. And so therefore, we aren't going to abide by whatever you tell us. It's quite simple. I use the example, I'm a mom, so moved out, older kid mom, but I liken everything to being a mom. And it's like your 28-year-old who's been living in your basement since he was 18 years old and doesn't work. And he says, Mom, Dad, I think you have to do this. You really should be doing that. And it's kind of the same way. Excuse me, you don't pay the bills. You're living in my house and you don't have any authority or right to tell me what we should be doing. It's the proper balance and restoration of the proper balance. We lost the balance, and apparently even state legislators don't understand this principle. So it's our job to teach them the history of America and what the Constitution and the Bill of Rights states.
Right.
So don't be surprised. I think we assume that everybody knows what we know, and that's just not the case. We are an educational and informational organization. So it is our job to educate ourselves. And then with that education, it's your job as the citizen to then go educate your fellow citizens, and most importantly, to educate your legislators. They don't know, and you don't know what they know until you ask them. Let me give you a little quick example. Quite a while ago in Idaho, when I was living there, there was a gentleman running for Congress. And when they're still running for office is the best chance that you ever have to educate them. They're still humble and they still know that they don't know everything. So every time he came to town, I would say, what do you think about free trade? And he would say, I think free trade's a good idea. And I said, wrong answer. And he would say, okay, where did I get that wrong? Well, here's a magazine, here's a reprint, here's a DVD, here's an article. Go home and study up on it. He would come back the next time. Okay, what do you know about sound money? He said, actually, I don't know anything about sound money. Great. Here's a DVD. Here's a reprint. Here's an article. Read up and come back to me next time. So finally, at the end, I said, okay, you've gotten most everything right now. You've educated yourself and I will support you. And that's the way it should be. We need to find and remind them, you don't know everything. And sometimes your constituents actually know more than you do. And you might even want to consult with me next time.
Yeah, that's a good example. I found that the state legislator packet is kind of sets you up in that situation as well. What I've seen is that the state political parties, what they do is they train their people on how to market themselves so that they can get elected, and how to file the proper financial disclosure forms so that they don't get fined or something like that. But so far as actually good principles of government, history, economics, anything like that, not much really. So when we come along and say, okay, here's a state legislator packet, it's designed for you as a state legislator so you can understand some basic principles. So if you do get elected, that you're not just wondering what do I do, and all you know is what the lobbyists and the leadership tell you. They tend to appreciate that, at least the ones that are, say they're for somewhat constitutional limited government. I suppose the other ones, some that think the Constitution is not worth anything, there's those too, but they probably wouldn't be as receptive to the packet. But most of them, I think, would be in a lot of these states. So that's a real good, a good situation. You want to be you're their friend. You're trying to help them out. That's a really good situation to be in. So then you can talk with them about the con, or there's many issues. And what I find especially is the New American magazine is very helpful in that way, because they're looking for talking points, and the New American has tons of talking points on lots of issues, and deal with lots of issues in the legislature, don't they?
I sure do.
Yeah.
Alden?
Okay, I think we got a comment question.
Yeah, I've got kind of a question here. Correct me if I'm wrong. I thought in Article 5 was to fix whatever was wrong with the Constitution.
Yes.
And so if it's gone about 200 years now and there's nothing wrong with it, why do we need an Article 5 anymore? I mean, it seems to me that if there's nothing wrong with it for 200 years, except for they got away from it and they're not obeying it, that's what we need to do, is get back to an Article 6 where we force them to obey their oath of office and to defend and uphold this Constitution. And I think all of our problems would go away. I don't know how we get them.
Ken, you're thinking way too rational.
Yeah.
Let me
No.
let me explain to you how and why you get this other side. The other side doesn't understand that there's enumerated powers, that they've gone past and beyond their limited authority. They don't understand that in the first place. They haven't read the Constitution. They don't know the Constitution, and they believe that it is the way it is right now, where the federal government has all the power and the states have lost all their power. So they're coming from that perspective, which is not from your perspective. Then you have to understand that this is a massive marketing campaign of theirs. And so what they did was they did surveys to citizens and legislators of what's the biggest problem. Well, we all know the biggest problem in Congress is spending, right? So if we just created a balanced budget, then all the spending would go away. Again, they're thinking like a citizen, like you or me. You or I have limited income, correct? So when we're talking about a balanced budget, it means that we would have to cut our spending. But that's, again, manipulation in the brain, because government doesn't have a limitation on income. They just create new revenue through taxation in order to balance their budget. But you and I in our brains thinks that balancing a budget would be a good idea, right? And so all of these things that they propose really are psychological manipulation of words. We call it a constitutional convention. They say, no, it's not a constitutional convention. It's a convention of the states. And now your brain is confused. You're thinking, well, what's the difference? And so you're thinking, well, they must be talking about something else, because what I understand is this. So all of what they're doing is psychological manipulation. We come out and Robert Brown gives testimony, and he gives you all of the footnotes and exactly where to go find this. This is not Robert Brown's opinion as a constitutional authority. He says James Madison in the Federalist article, Federalist number 39 and 40 states blah, 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 blah. Now what Meckler will come back and say, Robert Brown is not a constitutional lawyer. He doesn't know this. He's just a hobbyist is what he calls them. And so what would he know about it? When Robert Brown didn't give you his opinion, he gave you what James Madison said about a constitutional convention. But now if you're listening to Mark Meckler, you're going, oh, wait a minute, he's not an expert. But Mark Meckler calls in all these constitutional lawyers, and so they must know more than I do. It's not about a matter of knowing more than anybody. Go read it yourself. So this is what Birch Society always does. We go directly to the source material. We're not telling you what we think. We're telling you what they think or what they thought. But it's psychological manipulation to confuse your brain. And if you don't have a foundation to stand upon, you're a very easy target to be taken down.
Well,
Yeah, I
we've
think
got a-
that's,
Go ahead, Ken.
We've got a state senator here that we had the con pass here in Utah, and I don't know where you're from, but we had it pass here in Utah. They rescinded it, and then the state senator lives here in Cedar City. At the last minute of the last legislature, he brought it back in, and he done it in such a way there was no debate or anything. He got it pushed through that we're going to have we're Utah for a con, and there was no debate on it. There's no opposition or anything, and he got it pushed through. And this guy, when I've talked to him, he says, "You don't understand what's going on. We can set the rules. They have to go by those rules. If they don't go by those rules, There's nothing we have to do. And I said, you know, just like the last one.
Yeah,
They
how about
went
like the
there-
last election?
No, the last time they done this constitution, they went there just to amend the Articles of Confederation. They threw them out and give us a completely new, which I think was a good thing, but
Okay, so let me
they
give
could
you an
do the same
example.
thing.
Yeah, let me give you an example on that, Ken, though. How many people have actually studied how we got our Constitution? How many people know that? And so we on our side will say, this is what happened. Now, Mark Meckler's side, he will say, but that isn't what happened. And you're a legislator and you don't know what the truth is because you've never studied it. That's
Yeah.
the way they manipulate it. They didn't
Right.
study the truth. They don't have the time to study the truth. And they hear one side says this and the other side says it's the opposite. What are they supposed to believe? So this is why we have to show them the evidence way before the testimony so they stand strong and they can say, Meckler and your people, you're lying to us because I've read, I know the history of America. I know how we got our Constitution. But if they don't, they are a weak victim to marketing.
Yeah, that's very true. Well, we're right up against the hour, so I just want to thank you all for being on. Very good comments, a good, really exciting time to be in. One of the things I want to at least stress to everybody that's on here is never underestimate your ability to make a difference. This is an issue where you could make a profound difference for yourselves and your posterity. If you have not studied up on the issue, please do. Look at both sides of the argument if you want, of course. I hope you do. Look into what the founders said, look into what they did not say. There are many claims on this issue that are made, and you need to be able to sort them out rather than like Leah said, if you're ignorant of the issue, you're easy prey for somebody that wants to kind of sway you one way or another. So you want to make sure, and then you can educate others and make them aware. So thank you, both Leah and Claire and everybody for being on. I hope you all like, subscribe, comment, all that on if you're watching this on YouTube, and listen in for the next time. But thank you all for being on Birching the West. Let's get you next time.